There was a house at the end of Maple Drive where the porch light stayed on long after it should have gone dark. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd notice right away, not in a town like Millbrook, where people left lights burning out of habit or forgetfulness or some quiet fear they never named. But this light was different. It stayed on through autumn, through the first snow, through the long stretch of winter when the streets emptied early and the cold settled into everything. The house belonged to Sarah Hartley and her daughter, Emma. Sarah worked the early shift at the diner off Route 9, the one with the cracked vinyl booze and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting since yesterday. She'd be there by 5 most mornings, moving through the routine of prepping eggs and wiping down counters with the kind of muscle memory that doesn't require thought. Emma was 16, quiet in the way some teenagers are when they're carrying something heavier than they should. She'd walk to school alone, headphones in, hands shoved deep in her jacket pockets, her breath hanging in the cold air like small ghosts. They were the kind of people you'd see and not remember. Sarah at the grocery store, counting change at the register. Emma sitting on the stone wall outside the library, waiting for her mother to finish her shift. Ordinary in every way that matters, which is to say, invisible until they weren't. It started the way these things often do, with an absence so small it almost didn't register. Emma didn't show up for school on a Tuesday in late January. Her teachers marked her absent. Sarah called the school office that afternoon, her voice thin over the phone, saying Emma had the flu, that she'd be back in a few days. The secretary made a note. Life continued. But Emma didn't come back. The school counselor made a call to the house. Sarah answered, her voice flatter, more careful. Emma was still sick, she said. She'd see a doctor over the weekend. The counselor hesitated, but didn't press further. The porch light stayed on. In town, people went about their lives with the rhythm of winter routine. They scraped ice off windshields in the morning, ran errands in the afternoon, watched television at night with the volume up too loud, because the silence felt too vast otherwise. Sarah kept working. She'd arrive at the diner before dawn, her car the only one in the lot. Inside, she'd move through her shift with the same steady motions, pouring coffee, taking orders, clearing plates, but her eyes had changed. They'd gone somewhere else, somewhere inward and unreachable. But there were signs. The way Sarah would stop mid-sentence, her hand frozen over a coffee pot, staring at nothing. The way she'd flinch when the door opened too quickly. The way she started leaving 20 minutes early. Her manager calling after her with concern that dissolved into the winter air. At night, the house sat in its pool of yellow light. Inside, the television played to an empty living room. In the kitchen, dishes sat in the sink, water long gone cold. Upstairs, Emma's bedroom door stayed closed. Down the hall, Sarah would sit on the edge of her bed, still in her work clothes, her hands folded in her lap, listening to the house settle around her, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of old wood contracting in the cold, the distant sound of cars passing on the road beyond the trees. She'd think about the morning Emma didn't wake up for school, how she'd knocked on the door, call her name, knocked again, how she finally pushed it open to find the room exactly as it should be, bed made, backpack by the desk, clothes folded on the chair. Except Emma wasn't there. She'd checked the bathroom, the basement, the backyard, her panic rising with each empty space. She'd stood in the driveway in her pajamas, the cold biting through thin fabric, looking at the street as if Emma might simply walk back up the path. But Emma never did. Sarah had made the decision in those first hours, standing in the kitchen with the phone in her hand, her finger hovering over the 9. She thought about the questions that would come, the people who would arrive, the way they'd look at her, the shame of it, the unbearable weight of having to say the words out loud. I don't know where my daughter is. So she'd set the phone down. She'd called the school instead. She'd said Emma was sick. She'd turned on the porch light, the way she always did when Emma was expected home, even though Emma wouldn't be walking up that path. Days passed, then weeks. Sarah kept moving through the motions of a life that no longer made sense. She'd buy groceries for 2, standing in the cereal aisle staring at the box Emma liked. She'd wash Emma's sheets, even though no one had slept in them. She'd set the table for dinner with 2 plates, then eat standing at the counter, the second plate still clean and waiting. There was one person who couldn't let it go. Danny Reeves lived 3 houses down, a retired history teacher who had Emma in his class 2 years ago. He'd seen her walking to school on cold mornings, always alone. And now, he didn't see her anymore. One evening in early March, when the snow had finally begun to melt, Danny walked down to the house. He knocked on the door. Inside, he could hear the television. The door opened just enough for Sarah to look out, her face pale in the porch light, her eyes meeting his with something that looked like terror. "I haven't seen Emma around in a while," Danny said, his voice gentle. Sarah's hand tightened on the doorframe. "She's staying with her father," she said finally, the lie coming out smooth and practiced. Danny nodded slowly. He didn't believe her, but he also saw that pushing further wouldn't help. He walked back to his own home, pulled out his phone, and made a call that should have been made weeks ago. The police came the next morning. They found Emma's room exactly as it had been. Bed made, backpack waiting. They found the second plate at the table, the groceries for two. They found a mother living in the shell of life that had stopped making sense. They didn't find Emma. The investigation unfolded slowly, quietly. They called the father, a man who'd left when Emma was 7, who lived 4 states away and hadn't spoken to his daughter in years. They searched the house, the yard, the woods beyond. They pulled Sarah in for questioning, trying to find the crack where the truth would spill out. The details, when they finally emerged, were quieter than anyone expected. No violence, no stranger, just a daughter who'd grown sicker while her mother worked, who'd tried to call for help but couldn't reach her phone, who collapsed while the house sat empty and the porch light burned. Just a mother who'd found her too late, who'd made a choice in those first terrible moments that she couldn't unmake, who'd thought she could hide it, rewind it, pretend it never happened if she just kept the routine going. The porch light stayed on through the investigation, through the arrest, through the trial where Sarah sat silent while prosecutors laid out the timeline of those weeks. It stayed on while the house sat empty, while the for sale sign went up and weathered and faded. Eventually, someone bought the house. They replaced the porch light with something modern and bright. They painted the walls, made it into something fresh and disconnected from what had been. But sometimes on winter nights when the snow falls quiet and heavy, people driving past will still see a light burning there and feel that same unnamed tightening, that sense that some houses hold memory in their walls. And somewhere, Sarah sits in a room that is not her own, living in the endless loop of that morning when she made a choice, to stay silent when she should have screamed, to hide when she should have asked for help, to protect herself from a truth that would have been unbearable to speak aloud, but became something far worse in its silence.